Hey, Dave here, and today we're going to check out the work of Timothy Rodriguez. Now, Timothy is a freelance concept artist based in London, UK, and I would actually put this guy along with John Park just because of the style. It's a bit opaque, based on his the way he does his studies. Very heavy on the composition and not a lot of texture actually. A bit here and there, but he's kind of like John Park, where they're heavy on the composition and the shapes, right? And when it comes to the actual brushes being used, they're not heavy on the the basic round brush where you can see this kind of layering of multiple strokes. It's kind of like a one stroke kind of approach, like big brush strokes, right? And yeah, not just John Park, but I think, what's the guy's name? Shit. Oh no. Grimmer? He's kind of an environment artist as well, and they have the same kind of approach, big brush strokes for the most part. And they love to use layers, right? I think he's I mean, just based on how his artwork looks, it looks more organized and more clean. So the chances of him using, like a layered approach is going to be pretty high, right? And I'm going to be skipping his film work just because I want to focus more on his 2D paintings, right? Just because I'm more interested in the paintings and stuff. But yeah, let's proceed. So I do think he does use 3D sometimes for his paintings as a base, but in the end his work still ends up looking kind of natural, which I do like. It has a very artsy kind of look, because often if something is too rendered like in 3D, right, it can kind of take away the artistic hand of it in a way. I've noticed that when people do sculpts in ZBrush, I often find the screenshot way better looking than the actual kind of render version of the model, just because it looks kind of raw if you're kind of just getting a screenshot of say the clay version of the model. It just looks kind of artsy and shit. But yeah, Timothy is mostly an environment artist, and you can see he's pretty good with establishing the right shots, right? Again, heavy on the compositions. I think he does add noise in the end, right? You can see it a bit. A cinematic shot, very longitudinal, right? The detail is mostly in the columns here, the capital right here. The characters, they're mostly for scale. Maybe a bit of storytelling is involved, but it's not that significant. It's mostly about the scene, the architecture, I guess. Right. So here we have some studies, some painting studies, landscape studies, and I'm not sure how long each one would take for him, but if you look at the style, the approach, it's very John Park-ish, right? Very, very similar to his style, and I kind of see the value in doing paintings in this approach because it's more efficient. It takes less time than say going the Feng Shui approach, where you're kind of raw and just messy. Here you can actually be a bit more organized and actually save time. But it looks cool, right? And I think over time, once you do a bunch of studies like this, you develop this sixth sense when it comes to compositions, I think. And of course, it builds up your mileage in terms of painting. You just kind of get used to using the program of your choice, and you kind of find what works in terms of efficiency, like a process. Like when you do a bunch of studies, eventually your process kind of gets more refined. And obviously that's going to be very useful when you're doing actual concepts, right? Anyway. Oh, he does add a bit of noise, I think. Not really. The water has a bit of texture, right? I'm not sure how he did that, Maybe a bit of mixer brush being used from time to time. But again, very big brush strokes, very contained within specific layers, right? Oh yeah, Timothy has a Gumroad as well. I think as of now he has like 2 products on there. One is free. I think it's a PSD file or something, and the other is like a video, I think. I will be linking all of that in the description below, so no worries. So here we have, it's for industrial light and magic. Now obviously it's not very painted, so we're going to skip this one. Ooh, oh, this one I think he did use some 3D. Kind of looks like it. It feels like it, right? So he used 3D coat to sculpt the base mesh, and then he rendered it on Octane. So maybe a bit of post-processing in Photoshop. I can still see some brushstrokes here and there. And maybe this part is photo bashed in. I do see the value of speeding up a process by using 3D, and eventually I will get there, hopefully, one day. Once I'm actually decent with 2D stuff, but that's still something that I'm trying to figure out. But again, very cinematic shot right here. Heavy on the environment. A bit of narrative involved because you can tell a story via lighting, right? Composition and lighting especially, right? This one I feel like it's about discovery, right? Because the lighting, lots of Egyptian architecture being used here. Some kind of underground temple, right? Lost in the sands of time. He used Gravity Sketch, Octane Render, and Photoshop. So yeah, again, cinematic shot. You know what? I think it does make sense because he does work in film anyway. So I kind of see why he does the whole cinematic shot thing, right? Kind of like the keyframe artist Alexander Mandrajev, and even Jumabaev. Fuck. Both of them are very kind of oriented towards cinematic shots. So more studies, right? Very, very efficient way of painting. I'm not sure if he color picks the actual like colors from the photo, from the base photo or reference photo. I'm assuming he does, but look at how simple and basic it is, right? Or maybe not basic is not the word, it's just efficient, We're focusing on the big silhouettes, big shapes. You're breaking down the entire environment into like sections. The foreground, the midground, the background, right? And it's just a more efficient way of painting. It can kind of take away from the fun, I think. At least for me, just because I feel like I enjoy chaos more, right? And kind of refining that chaos or making something out of chaos. This one feels kind of too... It's still artistic for me, but it's kind of bordering on the mechanical kind of approach. But it still looks very artsy to me, right? Because it's not too clean, it's kind of still... It has a variety in terms of texture, and it's not super clean, It feels like it was done manually. I think that's what makes it look artsy, is the fact that it looks kind of manually done, right? And mistakes are what makes art kind of art usually, If it's too perfect, it's going to look somewhat artificial, right? So here we have a breakdown, right? So it helps if you paint via layers, just because, most environments do have lots of elements in them, so it's going to take time if you keep painting over mistakes. So by doing this sort of approach, layering your entire concept or scene, it's easier to adjust, easier to paint, and it actually kind of encourages you to think of the bigger picture, right? And yeah. So we have a mountain study here. I love the way the shadows were done, right? Look at the big brushstrokes. Very, very efficient. It's almost graphical in nature. Oh shit, the guy's name is Jordan Grimmer. Ooh, so smart. Yeah. Right? I think so. Fuck. Even in this foreground right here, look at how the trees were done. The trees in shadow and the trees in light. Very, very basic. It's almost like a gouache study, right? Ooh, again, very, very big brushstrokes. The shapes are very kind of clear cut. Some texture brushes being used, some splatter noise brushes, right? Some brush spacing is kind of seen. It helps add a bit of texture, right? The shadows, fuck. Yeah, he's very close to John Park in terms of style, right? Maybe he has some oil painting influence. Oh shit, these are Richard Schmid studies. I think he's a traditional oil painter. So maybe he does have the same influences as John Park, right? Some more ancient Egypt stuff. So we have two pylons. I think they're called pylons, right? These two things. Oh shit, he did it with Gravity Sketch, Octane Render, and Photoshop. At first glance, it feels kind of painted with a bit of photo bashing. So it's kind of pretty cool seeing this shot. And again, he does add noise in the end. It helps to kind of tighten or bring everything together into one shot, right? Some storytelling in terms of the lighting, but that's pretty much it. It's mostly about the environment and not so much about the character right here. Some personal work of his. It's a bit of a. He's still using Octane Render and Gravity Sketch in this one, and obviously some paint overs in Photoshop in the end. This is mainly a 2D thing, a painting, I think. Right, a bit of photo bashing. And again, it's about the environment. There's another guy, Lacoste. He's also an environment artist, right? And they tend to pick very simple shots because it's mostly about the design anyway. Like the concept, it's not so much about the like the story. They're not like keyframe artists, you know, like Alexander Mandrajev, you know. Although I've seen, oh shit, let's go back here. Well, you know, if you check out Timothy Rodriguez's work, he does have like a few cinematic shots for his film work, obviously, but for his more personal stuff, he likes to just stick to stable. He likes to stick to stable shots. Fuck, right? Kind of like this one. Look at the hue variety in this castle remain, right? So many browns, so many reds and blues. That's pretty cool. It looks kind of filled up, even if it's kind of messy. If you have like a lot of like hues in it, this variation in general, it's going to look filled up, right? And at the very least, it's not going to be boring. You know, it's going to create some kind of interest in your work. I think the smudge tool was used here, just my guess. Here we have some night studies, very, very classic thing to study in the concept art world. Warriors, knights, soldiers. Look at, again, the very, very efficient way of painting. I'm not sure if it goes in raw with like the with the shapes, or maybe he does a simple line sketch in the beginning. I'm not sure what his actual process is, so fuck. But in the end, you can still see that sense of efficiency, right? Yeah. Anyway, moving on, we have some more studies, some World War studies, right? I think John Park likes to do the same thing, like submarines, tanks, right? He does have a very consistent style, you know, Timothy Rodriguez, right? Like you can see he's pretty much using the same kind of process, and that's why his work tends to look kind of consistent. So I think you can develop I think you can develop your style just by doing a bunch of studies, because you're going to break down a certain image, studies are pretty much you breaking down lots of references, right, and kind of mix and matching certain ideas. Over time, you're going to develop a process, and that process will lead you to you're going to eventually develop a style based on that constantly evolving process. So I think just doing more studies is or getting better at doing studies is the way to go, or is a good way to develop your style. So that's kind of advice from myself to do more studies, I think, right? Anyway, so here we have a space exploration piece. He did use 3D coat and keyshot. So I think this thing is mostly rendered. I can see some paint overs, right? But maybe the base was done in 3D and then he kind of just went along with it, right? Or saw potential in that kind of shot and then kind of refined it in Photoshop and keyshot, right? Or submarines, very, very similar to John Park, right? Clouds and smoke, John Park likes to do the same thing. I mean, look at how the trees are so simple, but it looks kind of cool. So he did start out with the silhouette of the trees, very, very impressionistic, right? And then he kind of created a new layer and then made that into like a clipping mask, so that everything he kind of the paint is kind of contained within that initial kind of stroke. That's the point. So it proves, or it shows the usefulness of using the layering system in Photoshop, right? Maybe the mixer brush was used in this part, I think. Very nice. Even the way the reflections are done in the water, damn. And it's great, you know, if ever you're trying to do like a bunch of concepts, you're going to save so much time if you paint in this way, I think. And you don't even have to use color. You can go in for like a black and white grayscale piece, because you can always add color later on anyway, right? Oh, I can see a bit of line work in the beginning, very, very rough, more of like layout, a bit of background textures just to establish like the base wash in a way, a digital kind of wash. And then, you know, from there he just kind of adds it, or adds onto it layer by layer, right? And what's so cool is you can actually see a bit of red from the main, or from that initial kind of paint over, right? You can see it in the end as well. You can see a bit of greens, some blues, some reds. So it's not a boring study, right? So it's nice to have, again, that hue variety in your work, right? Even if you can still see a lot of the big brush strokes here, but because of the variety in hues and values, right? This nice contrast here, this light and dark contrast, it's just going to make it look more cohesive, right? Am I right? So this was done in 3D coat and keyshot, and probably Photoshop to kind of clean things up. So this was done for the game 3x3 or 3 Circle Media. Fuck. Oh yeah, it has a Jordan Grimmer vibes, especially when it comes to his album art, right? Actually, I think Jordan Grimmer likes to do more natural landscapes personally, but he does do sci-fi concepts as well. So I'm kind of feeling the same vibes here. Same thing for this dude, or for this piece. It's for this project. Even though it's not super rendered, it looks rather clean. Personally, I would go, or I would be more messy with this thing, but you know, it works for this guy. And it's actually kind of nice to look at. The sunset, right? Like you can actually feel the sunset. It feels rather refreshing, right? I think it's a sunrise actually. Fuck. Oh, a different shot here. So we're kind of morning, noon. It's pretty bright. I'm usually indoors by this time. Oh, the trees are mostly painted, right? Even the background is kind of painted. Very, very basic shapes. A bit of photo bashing maybe in these areas, just to indicate some buildings, some smaller ones. But for the most part, it's rather basic in a way, right? I love the clouds. Chemtrails? Ooh, I think he does have a PSD of this in his Gumroad, and I believe it's free. So like all you have to do is type in 0 to get it for free in the kind of checkout section. Now for these ones, he does add some photo textures, right? Photo bashing, but he does start out with obviously like the main strokes first, right? And then he'll fill in the photos later on. He kind of reminds me of the process of James Paik. Like I've seen a couple of videos of him painting in this way, where it's just like him painting with the paintbrush, adding in a photo texture, usually just one, and then he'll paint over it again. It's not a very complicated process, it's rather raw, simple, but obviously it helps to kind of layer things just to make it more manageable later on as you kind of develop your concept more, because obviously you're going to add more detail eventually, so being able to manage your entire piece is going to be desired, right? So layer your stuff, right? Especially for more complex scenes. I love that reflected lighting, right? In this kind of opening, in this feature, right? Some fog, smoke brushes, perhaps. You can see a bit of mixer brush, I think, being used in the sky. Lots of texture, but it's well blended, right? Here you can even see that photo, but because you can see that kind of blurred effect happening where you kind of expand the photo, right? And the pixels are kind of a bit seen, but if it's well blended, it's going to make sense. You know, it's going to look cool anyway. Like it's not going to stand out too much if you blend it well enough, you know. And look at the colors. Look at how they're under one scheme, one color scheme for the most part. Yellow, red or orange red, green or yellow green, and then we have blue. Now this one is more complementary, right? You can see a bit of brown, orange, some warms and some cools, but it's mostly a cooler piece. The only warm thing here is the foreground where you have the sand, right? A nice contrast here, right? Very, very light, very, very dark. Pulls you in this area first, and then you kind of work your way to the foreground, right? More contrast, less contrast, a bit of contrast, and then, you know, right? So anyway, that's it for this art review of Timothy Rodriguez. I do recommend, if you're kind of a French speaking person, we do recommend the interview I found of him and this chick. So you can check it out in there's a link in the description below. Also follow him on Instagram. I think he does have an Instagram as well. And if you want to buy some of his products, check out his Gumroad, which will also be linked in the description below. So thank you for watching. Keep drawing, keep painting, and stay free.